これは第53回成功したデモです。過去エピソードで新しいカードの理論と戦略を議論します。今回のカードはDarumaです。Daruma is a Japanese traditional doll commonly associated with Zen Buddhism and is often used to symbolize good luck in the Japanese world. Now, and this is reflected by the kanji character on the Daruma doll, both in the Wikipedia entry and on the card. That kanji character is Fuku, which means fortune. So that's Daruma for you. Its mechanics are kind of interesting because this card involves trashing itself. I'm not sure why you would trash a Daruma doll, but well, who knows? So when I saw the mechanics of this card, I immediately thought of Toshiyuki Sakai, RIP rotation. And even though they kind of do the same thing, they're completely different. Now, Toshiyuki Sakai, as we all know, is such a terrible card that most of us don't even remember what it does. And the reason it's so bad is because Toshiyuki is an asset. That's a problem, because if the runner does not run your Toshiyuki Sakai, it's absolutely useless. It does nothing on its own. It adds no value on its own. Whereas Daruma is an upgrade. You can actually install useful cards on it. Useful cards, typically like strong assets like Rashida, or agendas that you don't want the runner to steal. If the runner doesn't run it, you get the benefit from said strong assets or agendas. If the runner runs it, however, you can trash Daruma and preserve your assets and or agendas by returning back to HQ. Instead, you get the runner to access something else slightly less desirable. Probably something like an ambush. So that's the design intention of Daruma. As we saw in the previous episode, the Jinteki cards that were printed in Rain and Reverie all have the theme of either advanceable ambushes or ways in which to force the runner into accessing said advanceable ambushes. And Daruma kind of does that by, presenting the runner with an ambush either from hand or somewhere on the board. Alright, to me, however, it feels like Daruma's best use case is actually as a defensive upgrade. I value the ability to defend your power asset or your agenda more than the ability to so-called force the runner into an ambush, simply because it doesn't force them into it at all. Because of the window at which this fires, which is on server approach, the runner still retains the window to jack out after the Daruma swap. So at a basic level, you might be able to play some mind games with it. After the swap, the runner might say, I don't want to access anymore, that could be a snare, but in reality it's a philotic entanglement that wins you the game. There are mind games possible there, but again, I value the ability to take away an agenda from the table that the runner was about to steal and put it safely in hand. So it kind of works as a very interesting defensive upgrade. While it doesn't end the run like a Caprice Nisei and it doesn't stop accesses like Ash, it is able to keep your agenda safe and force the runner to waste valuable resources making that run. Of course, it's irrelevant if you are not protecting your server with ice, which is why we are playing Daruma in an ice remote in a glacier deck, so that every time they run the Daruma, all they get is something useless for their efforts, and you get to keep your agenda safe and sound while they waste money breaking your ice. So that's the idea behind Daruma, and it has some weaknesses that are worth discussing. Daruma is cheap to trash, just like Marcus Batty, and it's also single use. So those are two very big problems. This means that they contribute to a higher porosity on R&D. And I forgot to put it on the slide, but it also doesn't really work on centrals. You can't deter central runs with Daruma. Defensive upgrade wise, it doesn't stack with itself. You can put 3 Marcus Batties in a remote and fire it off 3 times consecutively, but you can't do the same for Daruma. Or rather you can, since it's not unique, but there's no point in doing so. What's the point in swapping the same card in a remote multiple times, right? So it's pretty redundant in multiples. It also costs 3 influence like Marcus Batty, which means that you'll find it pretty hard to splash our faction. And finally, it requires a valid target in hand or on the table in order to perform the Daruma swap. This is actually a fairly big limitation. If we are comparing this side by side with Marcus Batty as a defensive upgrade, Marcus Batty is useful only when there are res eyes and good subroutines on that server. Daruma is only useful if you have valid targets to swap with, which means that if your HQ is empty, Daruma is not a threat. Clan Vengeance becomes a problem, as it hard counters your Daruma if you're looking to swap from hand. So these are weaknesses to keep in mind as we move to the Ag Infusion deck that we presented in episode 53A. If you remember, this was the Thimble Rig episode. We played Daruma last time, but we didn't get to showcase it. If anything, the one time where I could have used it, it couldn't have been used because my opponent was playing Clan Vengeance Valencia and there were no valid targets in my hand to swap during the Daruma trigger. So that game already showcased one of Daruma's limitations. That is a blank defensive upgrade. When you're Clan Vengeance, I would rather have Marcus Batty in that scenario than Daruma. But we are having a different matchup this time. Hopefully Daruma can be of more use. Let's hop into the game and find out. Alright, today we are up against this amazing splash screen. I can't say this enough. The JNet devs really have outdone themselves again. This is so beautiful. We keep our opening hand because it has no agendas, and we are up against Adam, right? Adam, with the HQ multi-access, is a terrible force to be up against if you are stuck with too many agendas in your opening hand. Even though the ice that we have is subpar, once again we start with an opening swordsman, but we can make do with it for now, especially if our opponent installs Ormakua early. So Swordsman goes on HQ, and we have 2 scarcities in hand and 2 hedge funds. So we are going to be rich, but we are also going to be able to suppress our opponent's resource installation. Unfortunately for us, our opponent is going for program-based econ engine in RNG key. Obviously it's expected, but the problem is scarcity is not very useful because it doesn't really suppress my opponent's economy if they are going to just get 3 credits every turn with RNG key and find the truth. So what we need to do first is to ice up R&D. That will stop them from stealing agendas and getting RNG key money. Then we can think about playing scarcity. And we get exactly that. We find Thimble Rig. You notice that I click one draw first so that they can't be sure that's a Thimble Rig on R&D. And then I play Hedge Fund. Now I've just drew into my 3rd scarcity as well. So immediately right out of the gate, I have all 3 of my counter currents in my hand. This makes it very easy for me to just play scarcity outright. Even if my opponent has an E-Strike in hand from their opening hand, they won't be able to deal with my follow-up scarcities. So I get the scarcity out. This should slow down my opponent a bunch, and then I play IPO. Unfortunately, by this time my opponent has already gotten 1 full Liberator account off, which is a bit unfortunate, but well, I guess a late scarcity is better than never. Adam does like to install quite a few resources, so hopefully that's good. Also, the 2 agendas in my opening hand or rather in my starting hand, are not ideal in the sense that I would much rather see opening Niseis rather than opening Obokatas. However, the silver lining is that the Obokatas are virtually impossible to steal. My opponent has stuck with a very low hand size thanks to safety first, so they'll find it very, very difficult to steal the Obokatas, which means scarcity will remain in play for quite some time. Now I have to decide between scoring the Obokata or waiting for the Nisei to come up. The next agenda I draw might not even be a Nisei, so I think I should just start scoring the Obokata here. The best part about this is that I am making it look like a Nisei Mark II, because I single advance it. So if I can tempt my opponent into running the remote here, I could actually be pretty further ahead. I mean, I could, I could force my opponent to lose a lot of their resources. The thing is, yeah, scoring the Obokata as a first agenda is definitely not an ideal situation, but if I can capitalize by forcing my opponent into the remote DNA tracker, I think I'm winning. And that's exactly what happens here as they run click 2. I show them the DNA tracker. They have 2 different ways to break it. They can break it for free with Logic Bomb, but that would cost them the rest of their turn, or they can pay with Lamb, and it turns out they had just enough money to do so. So they're gonna run through, break with Lamb, and I'm happy to let them access. With only 2 cards in hand, they can't do anything about this Obokata. So basically I just forced them to waste 7 credits of resources, and more importantly, it makes HQ and R&D run super dangerous because I can just boop them onto the remote, where they're forced to pay another 7 credits and gain nothing from it. Basically, DNA tracker on the remote means that my ID ability is now live and dangerous. But then they end the turn on 5 cards in hand, and I'm like, wait, whoa, how did that happen? Turns out they installed Brain Cage. That's not their console. That's the cybernetics that gives them +3 hand size after dealing 1 brain damage. So their max hand size is 5. They can steal this remote Obokater. I am very worried. So I immediately slap the Ginger on my remote and draw into a Chiashi and immediately get it installed. Now, this is not the ice to see at this point. This is not the ice I want, because they can just waltz into my remote and nick off the Obokater there. Right? I can't afford to rest the Chiashi. They can break DNA Tracker with Logic Bomb. Even though they have no money to break with Lamb, they can definitely break with Logic Bomb and then steal the Obokater. So this agenda is completely free. They can get it if they want. But they don't seem to be interested in it, interestingly enough. They do know it's a Chiashi because Ginger Grid does reveal the ice on my remote. But they're not interested in running, which is actually curious. Yeah. One unfortunate thing as a result of doing the Ginger Grid into Chiashi play is that my ID ability is no longer live. By covering up the DNA tracker with the Chiashi, I can no longer boop people into the Chiashi. The res DNA tracker. It stays on the remote, and if they run HQ or R&D, I can at best boop them into archives. I can't force them into encountering the DNA tracker. So that's a bit of a problem, because it means that my opponent can now more easily pressure my centrals. As you see right here, they're going to pressure R&D, so I can't boop them into the remote DNA tracker. All I can do is to res the ice that's sitting on R&D, which is Thimble Rig. It's not going to do much, but because they don't have the decoder out yet, they only have Lamb and Nanok K, so it's either pay 5 to break Thimble Rig or end the run. Paying 5 with Lamb, of course, or use Logic Bomb, both of which are kind of overkill for a simple binary code gate. But overkill it is, as they really do spend 4 credits to break the Thimble Rig for a single access. But they do get the money back, so it's kind of worth it, because RNG key guarantees that they get 3 credits off the R&D access. So in essence, they get they pay 1 credit for an access, they access a second Thimble Rig. Now, start of turn, I can swap the Thimble Rig with something, and this is where I realized Thimble Rig is so good. I can swap it with the innermost DNA on my remote, score this agenda here, and guess what? Now, my ID ability is live again. Right? Even though I covered up my DNA tracker earlier because I needed to construct the scoring remote. Normally, your DNA tracker in the innermost position is then dead in terms of your ID ability. But with Thimble Rig, the ability to rearrange your ice means that now you can put it in a position where it's now live again. And I immediately abused that by booping my opponent into the DNA tracker on R&D, forcing them to waste 7 credits breaking the tracker. Lucky for them, they made the run with exactly 7 credits, so they're breaking this tracker. But you see how good it is. I just forced my opponent to lose 7 credits on a whim. And yeah, that's Thimble Rig for you. It synergizes super well with Agent Fusion because it allows you to reposition your most spiky ice as the outermost ice on whichever server you want, making them valid candidates for Agent Fusion booping. Unfortunately, by using my HQ Ice for booping, I left my HQ completely wide open, and neutralize all threats is going to neutralize the Obokater in my hand. With 5 cards in their hand, they are going to be able to steal it. Oh, and they're going to wipe up the NGO front in my hand while they're at it. So, very, very unfortunate turn of events. I really wanted to install Double Advance the NGO front in the remote for money. Now that I can't do that, well, things get awkward. I lose my scarcity lock. And they do lose 4 cards, but that's not a big deal because what are those cards? Brain Chip, Daily Cast, Stimhack, Turning Wheel, not the biggest deal. Right? They're still well and truly alive, and it also means that once they get their brain cage, their brain chip, their console down, that's when they can start partying with a big hand size and lots of memory. I play my second scarcity here just to keep the economy down. I normally would reserve them as counter currents for employee strike, which Adam loves to run. I played it there only because my opponent was very poor. They won, 0 credits? So scarcity would really put the hurt in their economy if they're already so poor. We are halfway through the game and our scorelines are even, but I think I have the board state advantage here because my opponent does not have the decoder at hand and I have 2 thimble rigs on the remote. Hard end around code gates so I can score agendas off it. Unfortunately, my opponent does a 360 no scope on R&D, finding a Nisei Mark II and stealing it, putting them immediately on match point and drawing them a bunch of cards. Not good. This not good. Not good, not good, not good. Alright, suddenly they are now threatening to win with 1 agenda. And yeah, that Nisei I could have really used to score instead. So yeah, the central pressure from my opponent really paying off. Even though the DNA tracker is supposed to be really expensive to break, and it is, 7 credits a pop, it's not cheap. But by popping their logic bomb on R&D, they got a free access, and it so happened to be the Nisei Mark II I so badly needed. You bet I would have jammed it in the remote had I drawn it instead of my opponent stealing it, and that would have made a world of difference. Instead, now I'm stuck constructing a 5 deep remote that isn't really going to be very relevant. There's no point in having a good remote when you don't have access to those agendas when your opponent is running R&D every single turn. Yeah, so it's very rare seeing a runner that's able to sustain R&D runs through a DNA tracker, but my opponent seems to be managing it pretty well even without a single multi-threader. Yeah, they're doing it again. They're dirty laundering R&D, and it's completely fine for them because even though it costs 7 to break, they're getting 3 net credits back off dirty laundry and another 3 credits off RNG key. So realistically, that run cost them only 1 credit and they get a free access. They get information. They know that I'm about to mandatory draw into a Fairchild 2 that I'm not going to install on the remote. Instead, I draw into the 3rd useless agenda in a row. After 2 Obokatas, I draw into a future perfect. That's absolutely not the agenda I want to see at all. It's probably going to cost me the game. Thankfully, it's a defensive agenda, just like Obokata, so I can just leave it in my hand and hope that my opponent isn't able to win the side game on it. That seems like my out right now. So I immediately draw. I spend the rest of my clicks drawing because now I have the remote set up. All I need is the agenda, and I do find the agenda in the Nisei Mark II, so I jam it in the remote. It's way safer there than in HQ, where it could get neutralized by Adam. I also need to pay attention to my economy. I need to have enough money to rest the Surveyor and the other ice on my remote. So I'm probably going to play the Celebrity Gift here. Unfortunately, this does mean showing off the Future Perfect in my hand. As my opponent starts running HQ, I'm very tempted to rest the Chiashi here, but Chiashi turns out to be a really, really, really bad investment against Lamb runners, right? Adam with Lamb breaks Chiashi for the same amount of money. Actually, it breaks Chiashi for less money than a DNA tracker. It only breaks Chiashi for 5 credits because you don't need to spend 2 credits converting Chiashi to a barrier. It already is. So Chiashi is just really bad. So actually Chiashi is better served as Ag Infusion fodder. I boot my opponent into R&D, force them to spend another 7 credits on the DNA tracker. Sure, they do get a return on their investment with RNG key, but it's better than letting them get a 2-card access on HQ, which could potentially win them the game with Future Perfect. At this point, there are 3 agendas in R&D of 22. There are 3 agendas in the score area, 1 in my hand, 1 in the remote, so only 3 remain on R&D, so that's fine. Now, over to my turn. We need to short R&D here, so my turn is almost certainly going to be Celeb Gift, followed by Install Ice on HQ. The only question is, which ice? Fairchild 2 is cheaper, so I'm definitely leaning towards it. I can't really afford to spend lots of money resing ice at this point, but DNA Tracker is bulkier. In the end, I went with Fairchild 2 simply because if my opponent is breaking it the hard way with Lamb, it's going to cost the same amount to break as with a DNA Tracker. As my opponent attempts to play Emergent Creativity here before taking it back, it turns out that my opponent was seeking their console, their brain chip. The problem is their bin already had 2 copies of brain chip, and they were only running 2 brain chips, so they actually did not have access to the console anymore. So they took back the Emergent Creativity, which was fine. Yeah, so that's a bit of an awkward spot for my opponent. They are not gonna have more than 4 memory for the rest of the game because all the brain chips end up getting discarded their last brain chip specifically got discarded because of Obo Carter net damage. So, I mean, it's not the biggest problem for them, but it is kind of awkward when you're running Lamb as your breaker that costs 2 memory, so you won't have MU left for your decoder. Right, over to me. Now, can we score this Nisei? Yes, we can. We sure can. I was checking the chat box just now. If you saw my Control F, I was actually trying to see if they had drawn any employee strikes, and they did. I would be able to defend the Nisei in the remote if I had Egg Infusion's ability, but if my opponent removes my ability with Strike, I can't defend the remote. So I needed to wait for a defensive upgrade, and Daruma finally came, so I was able to advance Nisei without worrying about it being stolen because of the Daruma. Now in the remote. So even though my opponent stim hacks here, I know that no matter what, I can safeguard my Nisei Mark II by swapping it with the NGO front in my hand. In fact, this is a win-win for me because not only do I keep my Nisei Mark II safe, but because my Nisei has 1 advancement token on it, the NGO front will be swapped in with 1 advancement token, so I can immediately cash it in for 5 credits because I still have the window to rest stuff and pop paid abilities. So I'm gonna gain lots of money out of this while my opponent's gonna lose money on the stim hack run. And I'm making sure they're gonna lose money by resing the surveyor here, which they don't have a good answer to. No logic bomb, so they're paying real credits to break it with Nanok K. It's not the worst deal. Nanok K scales with the number of ice on the server, so it costs 7 credits. Not that bad, but definitely chipping away at that money. So we are gonna use Daruma here and swap the Nisei for a single advanced NGO front, except that it came in with no advancement counters. That's a bug. That's a JNet bug. That should have an advancement counter on it. So rules questions, we go consult the rules and everything, and it turns out that the new card that is swapped in with Daruma does not retain the advancement counters that the old card had. That surprised me. I thought the NGO front interaction worked. I thought you could swap out advanced agendas for an advanced NGO and immediately pop it for money. Now it's a lot less good. Oh dear. We'll talk about this more in the post game, but for now, my opponent gets to deny me yet another economy card in my NGO front. What a bummer. Now the silver lining here is that Daruma still did its job in the sense that it kept my Nisei Mark II safe. It's now in my hand, and because that was a last click run, my opponent could not simply swing over to HQ and fetch it out of hand. So we are gonna install advanced Nisei again, and this time it will get through for a different reason. Because we managed to bait out the employee strike from our opponent, because we managed to bait out the stim hack from our opponent. This time when we install the Nisei Mark II in the remote, we can then follow up by playing Scarcity of Resources, which trashes the employee strike and makes it such that Egg Infusion's ability is live. Now they have to run through my remote twice, which means running through that bulky surveyor twice, and it also means that they have to break IP block twice, because I'm just gonna boop them with my innermost ice on server 1. So being smarter than me, obviously they say, I'm not gonna bother with your stupid remote. I'm not gonna make it through twice. Instead, I'm gonna just run HQ and snatch your future perfect from your hand. All I can do here is res Fairchild 2 because I'm bloody poor. I really wish I had the extra 5 credits from NGO front. Maybe I could have res the outermost DNA tracker instead. As it stands, the Fairchild 2 is fairly easy to break with Guardian Blade and their inflated cash stack. They're so rich. Jeez, they played so many liberated accounts and casts. Yeah, so they're gonna access my full hand because neutralize all threats, and all they have to do is to win the side game on the future perfect. Being so poor, another problem is that I'm not able to play the future perfect side game properly. I would like to bid 2 here, but I'm forced to bid 0 because I'm nowhere near winning, and in fact my opponent does bid 0, stealing the future perfect for the game. Well, if there's one thing I learned from this game, it's that in the context of my deck as a pure Glacier deck, Daruma is lackluster as an defensive upgrade simply because I'm not running ambushes. The fact that it is a non-bow with NGO front is a huge deal breaker. I really could have used the extra 5 credits on the remote swap that one time I managed to use Daruma. And the thing is, Daruma is also not that good as a defensive upgrade because even though it did save my Nisei, I was able to pull it back to hand, and then reinstall it the next turn. The trouble is, I had to install Advanced Nisei once again, whereas something like a Marcus Patty that ends the run, for example, would leave my Nisei on the remote intact. I could have potentially triple advanced it next turn and scored the Nisei. So Daruma puts me a couple of clicks behind, a couple of credits behind. It's just not that good. It also forces me to lose a crucial economy card from my hand. As I swapped the Nisei back to my hand, I was forced to give up the NGO front. That was the only valid swapping target that I had available. This meant that I did not have access to it in the future as an economy card, further hampering my economy. All in all, the Daruma is really lackluster if you're not going to play with ambushes, so don't. I know this is not a very good way to end the video. It means that it wasn't exactly a successful demo, but hey, it's a learning journey and I like chronicling this stuff. Better to inform y'all that it doesn't work with NGO front. Take the bullet for everyone so that you won't make the same mistake as me. What I was more impressed by was Thimble Rig. Unsurprisingly, as I expected, Thimble Rig is just way higher in power level than the other Jinteki cards. Simply because it doesn't involve mind games and all that nonsense. Thimble Rig, let's recap what it did this game, right? My opponent ran my remote aggressively, thinking there was a Nisei in there, so I got to rest my DNA tracker. It's now the outermost ice, so it is a spiky target for Egg Infusion booping. But because I wanted to try to score my agenda, I was forced to cover up the DNA tracker with an outermost ice. This turned off the spikiness, so I no longer had a target to boot my opponent into. However, my opponent also then activated one of my Thimble Rigs by running on R&D, and as the outermost ice on R&D, this meant that at the start of my turn, I can swap Thimble Rig with a spiky ice, in this case the DNA tracker, and now DNA tracker is reactivated as the outermost spiky ice. It's a valid target for Egg Infusion booping. The res DNA tracker on R&D actually was basically the best answer I had against my opponent, who was hammering R&D every single turn for RNG key triggers. I wish I had the resources to pile the second piece of ice on R&D, but you know, the game just did not permit for it. I needed to score agendas more quickly, which meant that I had to pile my ice on the remote. And as a result, my opponent was able to get lots of R&D runs in. In retrospect, maybe I should have put the second Thimble Rig on R&D. I drew into it, but instead tossed it on the remote as ginger fodder, and also because with 2 code gates on the remote, it would force my opponent to bring out their proper decoder. In retrospect, it might have served better use on R&D. Well, you live and learn, but as far as I'm concerned, Thimble Rig has so many uses that we discussed in episode 53A, and this episode I just discovered another good use to activate Egg Infusion's ability. As promised from the previous episode, we'll do nombos and combos of Thimble Rig, but I quickly realized that there are just not that many nombos. Thimble Rig works very well with a lot of other cards. We've seen how it worked with Ginger Grid and Egg Infusion. Those are very good combos. Another one that I didn't get to showcase was Positional Ice. The likes of Chum and Inazuma can be positioned very well with Thimble Rig. My only issue is that these ice are not of a sufficient power level to justify playing. Otherwise, it's very good. Okay, playing it with Thimble Rig and being able to put them in the correct position. A very interesting edge case of rulings here is Thimble Rig's interaction with Code Replicator. So what happens is both of these trigger on Ice Pass. So if you trigger Thimble Rig's Ice Pass first, you swap Thimble Rig to another server, then you trigger Code Replicators on Ice Pass, and now the runner is forced to encounter the same, or rather approach the same piece of Thimble Rig. But this time, because the Thimble Rig's on another server, in essence what you just did was you deflected the runner to a different server. So it's basically a 2-card combo that replicates Egg Infusion's ability. I don't know if this is legal. Let me put this out there. Let me get this straight. This might not be a legal interaction because the Code Replicator trigger might fizzle. I don't know for sure. I'm just putting it here for theory crafting's sake. We have to wait for the unofficial FAQ to come out before we can talk about this. But just leaving it here, for in case y'all want to, in case it really works, in case it is ruled that it actually works. I can't see the future, but who knows. Anyway, that's this deck done. We've covered both Thimble Rig and Daruma, and I hope you enjoyed this episode 53. I know some of you might not be happy that I didn't get to completely showcase Daruma. Maybe in the future, if I can force myself will myself to it, we can do a trap-based Jinteki deck with the new cards. Otherwise, that's mostly it. And to all native Japanese Netrunner speakers out there, I apologize for butchering the intro. I don't know how badly I butchered it, but well, you can let me know how badly I did it in the comment section. Until the next time, as always, thanks for watching. Happy net running. Goodbye.